It's 1 minute past one, so I think we might as well begin. I think there are a few people still trickling in, but we've got an interesting seminar to get through. So let me just start the ball rolling. Welcome everybody to this PLAS Academic webinar. Thank you for joining us and for making time for this very, very interesting discussion by Claudia Rodriguez, who is reaching us today all the way from Wageningen in the Netherlands to talk about her PhD research about what actually happened to Mexican coffee policies during the administration of President Obrador. Claudia, I don't know what much more to say other than you're a PhD candidate at Wageningen, talking about aspects of agri-food restructuring that are very interesting to us, and coffee is always a particularly indicative and interesting commodity, partly because it's one of those places where we've seen this long divergence between falling farm gate prices and the incomes of coffee growers getting ever less, whereas the product that I get at my local coffee shop keeps getting more and more expensive. So there's a complex tale to be told there, and I hope that you can bring us another installment. So thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us. As per our usual way of proceeding, Claudia, you have about half an hour for your presentation, and then we'll go to questions and answers. I should also say that Zakira is going to drop a link to a Google form in the chat, so that if you're interested in getting on our mailing list, you can put your name down there and you can be added to our mailing list. And I believe, Claudia, that you've also said that you would make your PhD available through the chat. So a little bit later on, will you upload it just into the chat box, or will you send us a link?
I mean, I can just put it on the chat. So yeah, like you mentioned, I can do it maybe at the end of the seminar, maybe once we're getting to the end.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, good. But with the formalities aside, Claudia, we're in your hands. Can you do your screen sharing from your side?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, can you see my slide at this moment?
We can see it perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, first of all, Andrés, thank you so much for giving me the chance to present a summary of my PhD thesis. I think that this can be a little bit of a risky presentation because it's too much information in just a few minutes. But if it is okay with you, I would like to give it a try. If the information is too general, don't worry about it, because I'm very happy to present any detail later on if you have any particular question. Well, the topic of my thesis is the promised transformation, Mexican coffee policies during the administration of President López Obrador. A little bit of background about this president, López Obrador, is that he arrived to the administration in 2018, and he was known for having a left approach. I mean, in contrast to the previous administrations that supported large industries and that were very corrupt. I mean, President López Obrador came with a different approach. Before giving you more details about his approach, I want to give you, give me 1 second. Yes. I want to give you some background of this research. During previous administrations, before López Obrador arrived to the administration, Mexican farmers were subject to many public programs. I mean, there were many coffee programs that provided subsidies, in particular plants and fertilizers, but there were many issues with these programs. One of these issues was that there were very high levels of clientelism, because these subsidies were delivered through farmer organizations. I mean, farmers had to be part of an organization to receive the subsidies, but there was a lot of clientelism between public functionaries and the leaders of farmer organizations. More issues involved with these programs were that farmers receive plants of very low quality and very late on the season. There was a lack of marketing strategies. There was no technical assistance. The implementation was chaotic. I mean, there were also issues with the list of beneficiaries. I mean, some list of beneficiaries of these programs had farmers that were accepted in a discretionary way. So there were many issues with the implementation of these programs. And apart from that, we are talking about a context or a period on time where the industry acquired a lot of power. So López Obrador in 2018 arrived to the presidency, acknowledging that coffee farmers were left apart, and he blamed previous administrations that he called corrupt. He claimed that there were only neoliberal corrupt functionaries, and he blamed on them the situation of coffee farmers. So he arrived to the presidency with the promise of changing the system, of changing the direction. He proposed a radical transformation based on three aspects. One, to give priority to small scale farmers. Another one was to reduce corruption, and a third one was about the industry. He didn't avoid, or he didn't prohibit the operation of the industry in the country, but he promised that the industry would operate on their rules of under the framework of rules. So this is the radical transformation that the state promised. For the particular casing of coffee, he established two programs that I'm going to give you a little bit more details later on, but that target small scale farmers. And he also established a particular unit to oversee the correct implementation of rural programs and to create a list of beneficiaries. And apart from this, he established a policy that in Mexico is known as the elimination of intermediaries. This particular policy is focused on the fact that if before subsidies were delivered through farmer organizations, now farmers were going to receive the subsidy in a direct way without intermediaries. So this is why it is called the elimination of intermediaries. So this thesis is focused on understanding until what extent the radical transformation that López Obrador promised generated a change between the relationship of the state, small-scale farmers, farmer organizations, and the industry. So those are the actors of this research. The theoretical approach of this thesis is based on state theories, on social differentiation, and on value chain studies. The methodology is a qualitative approach. I did nearly 170 interviews to actors involved in either on the coffee value chain or in policy making. And this study took place in the south of Mexico. And the particular area where I did my study is called Soconusco, which is a region that is part of Chiapas. Chiapas is one of the poorest regions of the country. As you can see in the photograph here, this is the area, Soconusco. Soconusco is a very green and fertile area, but is one of the poorest regions of the country. So this is the introduction that I want to share with you. Now I want to go very briefly with the chapters of my thesis. just some information for you is that I have 4 chapters that I want to share with you. Each of these chapters are standalone chapters. I mean, there's not like a linear connection about them. I mean, every chapter is about a particular story. And what I do at the end, in the conclusion, I put all this information together. Regarding chapter 1, is about the evolution of coffee policies in Mexico. I'm gonna share some information about this in a very quick way, because I think that you may be interested more in the upcoming chapters. But this is just so that you have the overview of what the chapter 1 talks about. First, there was a stage during 1880 and 1910 when the support of the state towards the coffee sector was focused mainly on large farmers and on land acquisition facilities. Mm, Sorry, there was a second phase in the history when the state had a very active and a very high level of intervention in the sector. This is the green area that I'm showing. It's during 1958 and 1989. I'm giving here very particular years because that is the year when we have a Mexican Institute of Coffee in the country, and he had this institute had the duty to collect small farmers' harvest and to regulate the price of coffee. In contrast to the previous phase, small-scale farmers were the target of public support. And then we jump to a third phase. That is the main characteristic is that we are talking about neoliberalism. I mean, the Mexican Institute got shut down by this phase, and then most of public support to the sector was public subsidies through farmer organizations, like I mentioned at the beginning. The phase ends in 2018, because that's when the president, López Obrador, takes place, or takes the administration. So this is just some background so that we know, so that we have a general idea of how policies were framed in the past. Then I want to go to the second chapter. I think I want to spend a little bit more time on this chapter because it's very close or is very related with some of the publications that Andrés Dutoit has produced. This chapter analyzes incorporation of different types of farmers into different coffee markets. What I do in this chapter is I analyze how different social classes based on political economy, based in particular on Bernstein's social differentiation. I analyze how different social classes, in this case, capitalist farmer, PD commodity producer, and semi-proletarian, relate to different marketing alternatives that were located or that were available in my research area, Soconusco. So one marketing strategy is Nestlé, which is characterized by buying a species that is called Robusta, that is used mainly for the production of instant coffee. And then I analyze also the relationship between these farmers with the marketing alternative of farmer organizations. This marketing channel is characterized by demanding high quality coffee, in particular a species that is called Arabica, that is characterized by producing very high quality coffee, and by offering a high payment. In contrast to Nestlé, as it requires a lower quality species, it offers a lower payment. And then I analyze local buyers, which is the typical buyer that is on the local community, that does not have many requirements, but it offers a very low payment. And then direct sales, that in the case of Soconusco, farmers sell in a direct way to, let's say, restaurant, to the airport, to the bus station. So those are the type of direct sales that I found on the field. And what I found is that the conditions by which farmers are incorporated into the market vary significantly. For instance, let me just go back a little bit. Well, I don't. Yes, here. For instance, just so that you have an example of what I did, I compare how a PD commodity producer and a semi-proletarian related with farmer organizations. And what I found is that the PD commodity producer was able to be part of this market, which offers a high payment due to the high quality species that it requires. And I found that the PT commodity producer was able to enjoy this high payment because he has the means of production to produce a high quality species. I mean, he had the labor, he had the means to produce organic coffee, and he could also wait to receive the payment split into months, because farmer organizations don't pay right away. They pay on months. I mean, like they split the payment. And I found that a semi-proletarian was not able to participate in this market because he was not able to produce a high quality species, and also he couldn't wait to receive the payment split into months. So just a very brief summary, I analyze how these social classes related to different marketing strategies, considering different variables. Some of them, I mentioned them already, the coffee species, the payment that they receive, the labor that it requires, and other variables that came into place. And so the finding is that the conditions by which farmers are incorporated into the market are very different, very significantly. And this statement has implications for two elements. One is about global value chain studies. Here I found two different discourses. One discourse is the one that is held by international organizations such as FAO and the World Bank that aim to promote greater incorporation of farmers into the market. But I found that there were other authors, including Dr. Andrés and other researchers, who claim that it's not about getting more incorporated farmers into the market, but it's about analyzing the conditions by which farmers are incorporated into the market. So I claim the second one. I align with Andrés Dutoit that it is important, and the other researchers, that more than aiming for greater incorporation, it is essential to look at the conditions of incorporation. But what I add is that incorporation is very different, considering not only the type of market, but also the type of farmer that we're talking about. And also this has implication for Mexican coffee policies in two fields. One is that Mexican policies classify farmers, two topics. One is about classification of farmers, and then incorporation of farmers into the market. Regarding the first element, in Mexico, most policies target farmers based on the amount of land that they own. But I found, based on Bernstein's, let's say, concepts or theoretical approach, I found that there are many differences beyond line size. So this is one contribution, that farmers are not only differentiated by the amount of land that they have, but also based on the means of production that they have and the way they relate to the market. And another thing is that in Mexico, Mexican policies aim to incorporate, most of the times, small-scale farmers into the organic market. But I found that the organic market is an attractive alternative for certain farmers, but for others is not. I mean, I didn't have the chance to explain too much, but some farmers wanted to be linked with the industry. I will give you more information about that in the upcoming chapter, but this is the contribution of this chapter. Now, chapter 3 is about Arabica Robusta and the narrative of quality coffee. As I mentioned before, Arabica is a high quality species. It's the quality that is usually linked with the organic market, with fair trade, and with a high payment. And Robusta is a species that is linked with the industry, with Nestlé, with the instant coffee. So this chapter is about a resistance that took place in Mexico, well, since a long time ago, but it was very visible in 2018 because that at the end of 2018, the government announced the establishment of a very large factory in Mexico for the production of Nestle coffee. So there was a lot of resistance. Just a little bit of information about this photograph. It says in Spanish, it says more of the same. The government agrees with the big enterprises, but it doesn't listen to small coffee producers. So what I did in this chapter is I analyzed the politics behind this issue, behind the resistance of farmers towards Nestlé. And what I found by analyzing the politics of the coffee sector in Mexico, I found two different trajectories. One of them is two political and very diverse trajectories. One of them is about Arabica. What I found is that there was a very close collaboration between the state and farmer organizations that since many years ago have aimed to improve the quality of coffee. But I also found a lot of antagonism between them, I mean, between the state and organizations, because of the support that the state directs to Nestle and because of the way programs or coffee programs have been implemented. In other words, because of all the issues that I told you about at the beginning in the introduction that characterize public policies. And on the other hand, I found a very different, let's say, political configuration that is based around Robusta. What I found is that there was a very close collaboration between Nestlé and the state. I mean, the state supports the establishment of the industry in the country. But what I also found is that many farmers from the lowlands want to be linked with the industry. A technical aspect about Robusta and Arabica is that Arabica, to produce high quality coffee, needs to be harvested on high altitudes, but Robusta can be produced on lowlands. So what I found is that despite there is a lot of opposition by farmer organizations that produce Arabica, there are many Robusta farmers that want to be linked with the industry. And this is one, because they are located in lowlands and Arabica does not produce high quality coffee there. But also because Nestle has a program that is called the Nescafe Plan, and that has generated many economic benefits for farmers. The industry has supported farmers with plants that are very productive and that require less labor to produce coffee, and that is more resistant to rust, which is the main disease that coffee has. But I also find antagonism between these Robusta farmers and Nestle, mainly because of the low pay that the industry offers. So what I do with this is, first, I'm showing that not everybody opposes Robusta in the industry. There are farmers that want to be involved and want to be linked with the industry. So this is one learning from this chapter. And I also link the conversation with the production of high quality coffee. In Mexico, policymakers, researchers, and many relevant actors aim or propose high quality production as the way to go. I mean, they aim that farmers produce high quality coffee, that in this case is Arabica, but I found that a strategy based on a lower quality species is also very valid, and is also something that small scale farmers aim to generate. And now I'm just gonna go very briefly to the last paragraph, because I think that I only have like 5 minutes left.
You've got about 5 minutes left, so that's cool.
Okay, nice, thanks. So very quickly, AMLO, just some background. AMLO is the acronym of the president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. So this program studies rural programs, from AMLO's rural programs, and the policy of eliminating intermediaries. As I told you at the beginning, one of the main policies of this government, of this administration, is that farmers receive a subsidy in a direct way. What I found is that farmers are very pleased with this policy. I mean, many coffee farmer organizations oppose this policy because they thought that they were being bypassed, and well, different arguments. But I didn't find any single farmer that rejected this policy. All farmers that I interviewed were pleased that they received the subsidy in a direct way, and that they receive it in full, because before maybe they could receive something, or at least something. So I consider that this policy is an important tool to reduce the high levels of clientelism that we have in the country. So this is one thing. So I analyzed the implementation of two programs and the reduction of intermediaries. So now, regarding the implementation of these programs, there are two programs. One of them is called Sembrando Vida, which is called something like Sowing Life in English, and then Producción para el Bienestar, which means something like production for well-being. The first program is managed by the Ministry of Social Development, and it offers 250 euros. I'm saying euros just so that we can speak about so that we can have a similar amount in mind. But it's something that it offers 250 euros per month, so that farmers produce organic coffee, so that they produce or that they introduce agroecological practices. And then we have Producción para el Bienestar, which is managed by the Ministry of Agriculture, and it offers 250 euros, but per year. I mean, it's the same amount, but per year. And it promotes sustainable production. I mean, it doesn't aim for organic production, but it aims for sustainable production. So what I found regarding Sembrando Vida, and by the way, I forgot to mention, my study was focused on in 2019, I mean, the first year of implementation. Certain things have changed, but this information is based on the implementation in 2019. Regarding Sembrando Vida, I found that the substantial subsidy of Sembrando Vida was very appreciated by farmers, and that some farmers decided to retake some of the activities that they left apart in the past due to the lack of resources. And they also appreciated that they received technical assistance, and that the program promoted collaborative work among farmers. But they were very critical with some of the requirements of the program, because of the organic production that this program promotes. And also, this program aims for reforestation, but not all the farmers are interested on that. So those are some of the weaknesses that I found on these programs. And then regarding Producción para el Bienestar, I found that the implementation in 2019 was very chaotic. One, because previously, in the past, all coffee farmers were managed by the Ministry of Agriculture. So this ministry had a long history with a relationship with farmer organizations. And what I found is that farmer organizations place a lot of resistance towards the elimination of intermediaries. And also this program had to create or had to verify the list of beneficiaries that were in the past linked with this program. So the conclusion of this thesis is that putting all things together, as I think that I'm pretty much done with the time, is that I consider I mean, all the chapters talk about in different ways regarding the relationship between the state, small-scale farmers, organizations, and the industry. And what I consider is that certain things have improved. For instance, I consider that the relationship between the state and a small-scale farmer have improved. I mean, the substantial subsidy, for instance, is something very positive, but there are many weaknesses that remain in the programs. I mean, for instance, designing a program that does not correspond to the needs of farmers or overlooking social differentiation among farmers. So there are many weaknesses that remain. Regarding the relationship between the state and organizations, I found that the relationship is more tense because of this resistance of farmer organizations towards the policy of reduction of intermediaries. But I consider that this policy has been positive for the countryside for the field. And regarding the industry, I found that even though certain farmers want to be linked with the industry, the main concern of farmers, which is the low payment, has not been addressed by the state. So in this sense, the relationship remains almost the same. So in short, I consider that the state, considering 2019, important changes have taken place, but still the radical transformation is far away from being implemented. And yes, so this is it with the presentation. Thank you so much for all your time and for sharing part of your time with me.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Maybe you can stop the screen sharing so we can all see each other. Okay. Yeah, so thanks for that. It was a very interesting presentation. Colleagues, please come in and share your comments and questions. We usually take 2 or 3 questions at a time so that the speaker can sort of bundle them and address groups of questions together. Any comments or questions?
Can I come in, Andrés?
Okay, Syriac, why don't you start the ball rolling? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrés, and thank you, Claudia, for a very fascinating presentation. Sorry, my voice is a little bit crumbs. I hope you will hear me. I've got 2 small questions for clarification. Claudia, the first one is the focus of your study in what you call elimination of intermediary this policy for this new president. And looking at this focus, it does seem that it only focuses on the input part of the production, system, looking at the that kind of subsidies and how the agri inputs get to the farmers through those channels that we're talking about. But in my experience, in some of the work that I've done, especially in the coffee sector, much of the cheating for the farmers actually are happening on the marketing side, from where the coffee on the farm the coffee is produced to the stock exchange in New York where the coffee is being sold. There's a whole lot of intermediaries there, and which capture different values at different levels. The point that they squeeze the end, what Andrés was talking about, the kind of amount that gets to the farmer at the end of that long value chain is actually significant. And hence my question, why did you choose to focus only on this side of the of the input of input supply rather than the market the marketing of the coffee itself, where there's quite a lot of intermediaries, and the way really the value of the commodities being captured throughout the process. That's the first question that I want just to have for clarification. The second one is a general one. I mean, you compare in a way these two approaches, the market-driven approach that was for the previous administration versus the state-driven approach that the new president that we're talking about is adopting. What I find fascinating though for both approaches, that the common thing between them, listening to you, is that all of these two approaches in a way plugged the farmers or the smallholder farmers into this wrong, global corporate dominated value chain. You were talking about, for instance, the issue for Nestle with the Arabica, no, with the Robusta, I think, coffee, yes, with the coffee chain and so forth and so on. So in a way, even then the end results is for the two approaches end up by incorporating these farmers or plugging these smallholder farmers into this corporate driven or corporate dominated value chain. Is there any difference in then between the two approaches, whether it's state-driven or market-driven?
Yes, can I just ask a clarification? Is there a difference between the incorporation into the market, I mean, Nestle and this corporation approach, and which other one?
No, I was asking about this the market-driven approach that was adopted by the previous administration before this place that we're talking about here, before 2018, and the state-driven approach, which is now the 2018 onwards. What I was saying, it does seem to me that both approaches, the end result was to plug the smallholder farmers into this corporate dominated value chain. Hence my question, then what is the difference between the two? Did you find any difference between the outcome? Is there any significant outcome between the two? In other words, prior to 2018 and after 2018, given the fact that both approaches plug them into the value chain, into this corporate dominated value chain. Thanks.
Yes, well, thanks a lot for your very nice questions. Regarding the first one, yes, something that I wanted to clarify is, or what I tried to clarify is, when I refer to the reduction of intermediaries, I meant this policy in particular, because that's the way the state is using it. I mean, it's like this policy is being called the reduction or the elimination of intermediaries. So why did I focus on that and not instead of the intermediary that is linked within the value chain? Is because I wanted to comprehend the changes or the outcomes of the change of the policies implemented by the state. So the state established these policies that I told you at the beginning, that were certain programs, and that in the policy of eliminating intermediaries, and that's what I follow. So the state, for this administration, didn't establish a particular policy to eliminate intermediaries. So the intermediaries that you were talking about, the marketing intermediaries, so that's why I didn't focus too much on that. Of course, it's a relevant topic, but my topic comes from whatever the state established. I follow that and I try to understand the outcomes. Regarding the incorporation of previous administrations and the current administrations, I would say that previous administrations, I would say that the approach, let's say in particular, the last administration in comparison to this one, the approach is very similar. I mean, the idea when you go with a policymaker in the Ministry of Agriculture, the head of the coffee sector in the Ministry of Agriculture, and you ask them, so what are you trying to do with the coffee sector? They will reply, oh, we aim that more farmers get linked with the organic market. This is cooperatives or organizations. Yes, I would say that that is the same in comparison to the last administration and this one. But what I observe is that in my particular case, in contrast to what most of our seminars talk about, I found that certain farmers did wanted to be linked with the industry. I mean, maybe some farmers are, maybe some researchers would be surprised, because I think that on this field, the industry is the evil, no? Is the industry is the one that controls a lot, that has a lot of power. But I found that for this particular intervention, in this case, Nestle and the Nescafe plan, despite Nestle keeps having a lot of power, I found that farmers found many economic benefits being linked with the industry. But my message with the second chapter is that it doesn't mean that the industry will be sure for good, a good alternative, or the cooperatives will be for sure a good alternatives. It depends on the type of market and the type of farmer. That's my message. That is not only that we should look at or we should assume that somebody or a farmer should be linked with a particular market or another one, but it's about trying to understand the conditions by which farmers are incorporated and how this changes among different type of social classes.
Thank you, Claudia. I see Shane's got a hand up, but I also am going to abuse my position as chair and also throw a question in from my side. It'd be very interesting to, in a way, you're finding that the narrative you described here around coffee is very similar to the narrative which we've experienced here in South Africa in wine, where a lot of policy advice and expert guidance has been to the growers to target the various niche and quality areas where really high profits were going to be earned. And actually, what history has shown us in the last while is those are also the riskiest areas, and winemakers which have gone for making bulk wine for export to big industry winemakers have actually on balance done better. So it's not a surprising story, but I would like to hear more about what the reasons are why the Robusta growers have found that the niche quality strategy has been less preferable than going for Nestle. And also, I'm not quite sure of the timelines in your study, but we have also gone in the last few years through surprisingly high and kind of quite uniquely high coffee prices, partly due to what's been happening in climate change and a couple of bad harvests in Brazil and so on. So to what extent is the results you're experiencing shaped by a somewhat unusual period of high coffee prices internationally, and to what extent is it not impacted by those prices? I'm going to also hand over to Shane. We usually have 2 or 3 questions together. So Shane, do you want to come in with your question?
Yes.
Thanks.
So,
Thanks.
sorry. Sorry, I got confused.
So thanks very much, Claudia. My video is not working for some reason, but thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks, Andrés. Just to ask about the elimination of intermediaries. I understand what the purpose of that was, but presumably that didn't eliminate the farmer organizations that had been playing this role. And I'm interested to know what those farmer organizations have done subsequent, what their sort of political role has been, and whether any new farmer organizations have emerged representing smaller farmers and those that had been excluded. Because I think I overlap a little bit with the first question, because at the moment the state policy seems to have, in effect, disorganized farmers. And left them, to some extent, at the mercy of the big corporates like Nestle, etc. I take your point about some see benefits, but they're now operating as individuals vis-a-vis those companies with obviously much less power. And whether there's been any move towards them coming together to boost their bargaining power with those corporates. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for your questions. Regarding Andrés' questions of why farmers want to be linked with Nestlé and Robusta, there are different factors. First, I want to tell you that in the area where I did my research, we're talking about an area next to a volcano that is actually shared by Guatemala. We're talking about the border. So we're talking about different altitudes. So you find some farmers that are on the higher altitudes and that they have produced Arabica for a long time over there. But also you find farmers that are on lower altitudes, and from many decades ago, I would say at least, well, many, I would say 3. Sorry if that's not too many, maybe. But at least since 30 years ago, they started to produce Robusta. Well, one thing that I would like to tell you is that before the lower land farmers produced Robusta, they were producing Arabica. But years ago, the quality of coffee in this area didn't matter too much. I mean, I think that since the establishment of neoliberalism, quality has been took a different role in the market. I mean, there is more competition, so now you need to compete with a higher quality coffee. So since years ago, farmers used to produce a high, even though they produce Arabica, it was not high quality coffee. But then the market, the global market, started to change. So in that sense, quality was one variable of why they changed to Robusta. Another factor is that they introduced Robusta because it's a very friendly species. I mean, even though it's considered a lower quality species, is very friendly in the way that it's very resistant to plant diseases. In particular, in coffee, rust is the main disease or fungus that farmers or that affects coffee production. And the country was hit. At least it has been hit by very two strong coffee rust crisis, and one of them also took place years ago. So many farmers lost all their plants because they had Arabica. So Robusta is more friendly. Farmers have to worry less about this fungus. And then another aspect is about labor, and there are different aspects. Some of them are very technical. Yes, it's called Robusta for a reason. Yes, it's something strong. I mean, it's resistant. So, and another aspect was about labor. I mean, in Soconusco, farmers sell Arabica as parchment coffee. Parchment coffee, maybe I would need a little bit longer of time to explain all the different phases, but imagine that parchment coffee is a more advanced, let's say, processing stage, and Robusta coffee is sold just as a cherry. So farmers just cut or pick up the coffee, dry it, and then they sell it. But with Arabica, they need to dry it, they need to process it, they need to sun dry it again. So there are many phases, or it requires a lot of labor to produce Arabica. And also there are other aspects that are also involved with labor. I mean, for instance, Arabica harvest during raining season and Robusta during off raining season. And in Soconusco, I'm not too sure about South Africa, how it rains, but in Soconusco, in this part of the country, it rains a lot. I mean, you go out and it's like the heaven is going down. I mean, or the clouds are going down. I mean, it's very heavy rain, and it's very hard to find workers that want to pick up the cherries on those conditions. And another variable linked with labor is that before there were many Guatemalan workers that used to go from Guatemala to Mexico to work, but because there was a devaluation of their currency, less Guatemalans are in Soconusco, so there is less labor available. And there are other technical aspects. very briefly, for instance, Robusta produces coffee sooner, like within 1 year, it starts producing coffee, and Arabica takes at least 2 or 3 years. So because of all these elements, farmers produce Robusta, and they want to be linked with Nestlé because Nestlé is offering inputs and fertilizers and technical assistance, which in the past, coffee programs, I mean, the state was almost invisible. I mean, but the industry in this case was there. Regarding the prices, the role of prices on this story, see the way I manage prices, because I focus on 2019. So during this year, farmers were producing a very low payment. So what I did was, let's say, I didn't follow all the trend of the prices. Instead, they play a role on the way or on the condition under which farmers were the condition on which farmers were selling the coffee. But for instance, I can tell you that the variable prices also played another part of the story. For instance, to tell you that that farmers organize within organizations so that they can access higher prices, because the price of that is paid by local buyers or by Nestlé, the big industry, can be very low. So because of these low prices, they gather together to create an alternative, another marketing alternative. So yes, I would say, Andrés, that the role of the prices, they play a significant, they have a story in the whole thesis, but with different connotations. Mm-hmm. And regarding Shane's questions regarding the elimination, what has caused the elimination of intermediaries to the creation or the existence of certain organizations? Well, what I want to tell you first is that we need to keep in mind that there are many farmer organizations in the country, and with a different nature. I mean, we have the organizations, for instance, we have an organization that is called UCITI, that was the one that established a certificate that is called the Max Havelaar, with the Dutch, it's the Dutch certification that I can tell that Andrés is very familiar with this, and that has supported small farmers to reach more profitable markets. So what I can tell you is that we have this type of organizations. I would say, maybe if you allow me, they are the good ones of the story, right? They're the ones that are truly supporting farmers, and who, if they receive a subsidy, they use it to support farmers. But there were many clientelism organizations, and I would say that these were the majority. I mean, you went to the field and you found a clientelism organization in one corner and another one in another corner. So I think that these were the majority. So if you ask me, Shane, what happened with these organizations, I can tell you, farmers have informed me that some of the clientelistic organizations in 2019 got disintegrated because they didn't have a business anymore, right? I mean, the subsidies was the channel so that they made the profit themselves. So now with the reduction of intermediaries, they cannot make that profit, so they don't have a business anymore. So some of these organizations got disintegrated. Regarding the good ones, if you allow me to say, I would say that some of them place resistance because, as I mentioned, they place many arguments that they were being bypassed by the state and so on. But I would say that they continue operating. I mean, internally, they might have getting into new arrangements. You know, if before it was the leader of the organization that received the subsidy, and the farmer, like the leader had the money, and the farmer received the subsidy. Now is the other way. I mean, is the farmer who receives the money, and if they want to pay to an organization, they do it. So the governance has changed. And yes, I can tell you about this, and also about individual. You also asked me about individual aspects. I mean, if Nestle in this case is, or this type of organizations are mainly, let's say, operating by individual operations. Yes, I found that in most cases, farmers produce and they receive the inputs in an individual way. In particular, there are some, let's say, nurseries where farmers can go and pick up the inputs, but also Nestle promotes the organization of farmer organizations. Of course, this is a very different, these groups that are being formed by Nestle are very different to the one that I mentioned. For instance, Uciri, no? That Uciri is linked with Max Havelaar, so the operation is very different. So yes, I can tell you that individual assistance or individual operation is the main way of doing business with Nestle, but they also incorporate or promote farmer organizations.
Thank you, Claudia. We're almost out of time, but we've got time for one more question. I see Augustine Fosu has posted a question in chat saying, how do you consider the role of the state in the coffee industry? Is the state intended to promote the continuous exploitation of the smallholders in the coffee industry? I don't know. Do you want to comment on that question?
Give me just 1 second to read it again. How do you consider the role of the state in the coffee industry? Is the state intended to promote the continuous exploitation of smallholders in the coffee industry? In the coffee industry?
Obviously, you want to clarify, maybe you can add something to clarify your question.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Prof. Andrés. I'm sorry that I couldn't join the presentation initially. I'm sitting on something related to her work, and what I'm currently interested in is how the state is lubricating the form of exploitation that is happening in the coffee industry. How is the state assisting the bourgeois in order to exploit the poor? That is what I'm interested in, because you are talking about livelihood issues and other stuff. You may have discussed this in your presentation, but sorry that I couldn't join early.
Yes, well, what the state is doing to mitigate this let's say the condition or the unfavorable condition of farmers is through these two programs that I mentioned, but I'm not sure if you were able to listen to them. But the state has two main programs implemented by two different ministries and with a different logic. So I consider that certain elements of these programs are quite positive, so that farmers are incorporated in under more beneficial terms in the market. For instance, it is offering a subsidy of 2,050 euros per month, which is something very, very, very substantial. Before, farmers used to receive 250 per year. I mean, if they were lucky, because there was a lot of clientelism and sometimes they didn't receive anything. And another policy that the state is performing to support farmers is this policy of the elimination of intermediaries, is establishing a policy to make sure that farmers receive their subsidies so that they can acquire plants and fertilizers, so that they can be certain that they receive these subsidies in full, which is their right, and which was not being accomplished in the past.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Claudia, for a very interesting seminar. It's sort of we're often very used to receiving only very grim case studies of how everything has gone wrong. And although you say that this has been a mixed bag and the policies have not been implemented as initially hoped, you're also telling a story in which farmers have been able to make gains as a result of these policy changes. So that's thank you for that nuanced and carefully analyzed story. Thank you very much, colleagues. You will have seen maybe Claudia, you can post it again for those who haven't, but Claudia has shared her PhD thesis. It looks like a really interesting and closely researched project, and your thoughts you've shared here are really useful for our continuing understanding of the way in which complex agri-food value chains are being restructured by the intervention of government policies, as well as by the interventions of corporates and indeed small farmers themselves. Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you, colleagues. Thanks for joining us for this discussion.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, Andrés. I hope that some of this was helpful. And for me, it was super helpful also to listen to your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. All the best.